Welcome back to the final episode of the Cainhurst Castle. Not the final of the Bloodborne series, don't worry. We've got a lot more coming, don't you worry. But for the last episode of the expansion that is the Forsaken Cainhurst Castle, we are painting the Queen herself, Annalise, Queen of the Vilebloods. What a perfect way to send this one off. So same as all the other videos that we've done, we're starting off with a clean pot of water. We're using a dirty pot of water. We've got our kitchen roll for any spillages and wiping off excess water. We've got the wet palette with the horrible sponge in the middle. We're going to get it nice and soaked up, pop a sheet over, make sure that we've got all the wrinkles ironed out with a nice card so it's flat and even, ready for the paint to go on. Then we can take Queen Annalise, I might call her Queen Anny to shorten it, and we're going to prime her black so that she's ready for zenithal highlighting. We've got the airbrush, we've got our thinner, we've got our cleaner. We're going to pop some thinner into the cup before we pop in some white ink. Get it nice and mixed up by using the blowback technique, popping your finger on the end, pulling it back, making sure we're going to test it on some paper so we're not spraying everything everywhere. Take the makeshift holder, which is a cork with some blue tack, or if you fancy and have your own handle, use a handle. Then we're going to pop her on, and from a high up angle, facing down, we're going to spray the white ink, creating the nice contrast between the light and the dark. The higher up we are, the brighter we are, the lower down we are, the darker we are. And there you go, you get a nice soft gradient contrast from the light to the dark, ready for contrast paints to go on. Or check out the slap chop method if you don't have an airbrush. You can always do it with a dry brush technique. So starting off, we're going to paint her helmet with some Garagak Sewer, which is a nice dark brown contrast paint which will sink into all the nice recesses. And it's a really, this sort of like dark brown is a really nice shadow dark colour that gold can go on top of rather than just using black. Then I'm going to use the same colour to paint the wood parts of the throne. So the back part, the tops of the arms. The rest I think is gold, so I'm just going to paint all the wood parts with just this Garagak Sewer. And then once that is done, I can then move on to using some snakebite leather, which is a lighter brown contrast paint, and I'll use that to paint the parts which I think are the gold parts, because I want a brighter undercoat for the golds on the chair so they are nice and vibrant, and this is a good sort of coat for gold to have as well. So now that we have that done, we're going to move on to having some Skeleton Horde contrast paint mixed with some contrast medium to paint her hair. The contrast medium will just thin down the contrast, keeping the colour but making sure it's not too overpowering. Then we can use some Night Questor flesh and some Rakarth flesh to paint the skin, mixing between the two tones, the Night Questor flesh being the sort of darker, shadowy colours, and then moving up to the Rakarth flesh, which will be the brighter, dull, kind of fleshy tone, which will be the sort of mid-tones on the skin. Then I can mix in some white into the Rakarth flesh and just slowly, progressively start adding in the highlights to brighter areas of the skin. Then for her dress, I kind of wanted this nice kind of purpley tint to it, but I didn't want it too strong purple. So what I did was I mixed Skeleton Horde contrast paint with Shyish purple, which gives us that kind of like dull, mucky, muddy kind of purple tone. It's not overpoweringly purple, but it's not so dull that it doesn't look like it has colour to it, you know? That's the kind of colour that I wanted to go with, and then basically it allows me to then use more stronger concentrations of Shyish purple to add in sort of darker shadow tones to it. And you can see with the legs and the higher up parts of the dress, I've got more Skeleton Horde contrast in it, and I kind of blend between those two colours to add a bit of interest to the dress. With that done, I can move on to start painting the gold, and I'm going to start with a darker tone of Gehenna's gold, which is a nice rich, reddy kind of gold tone, and I'll use that to paint over the chairs where I have the snakebite leather underneath. And dry brushing it just means that it will just target the upper areas of it, leaving the recesses less touched, less painted. And then same again for the helmet, I'm using the Gehenna's gold, just dry brushing on very, very thin layers of it so that we are still keeping some of the dark brown shadows underneath. Then I'm just going to move up to different gold tones. So we have this Retributor armor, which is more metallic-y gold rather than the reddy kind of gold. And I'll use that and just dry brush on very small amounts of that onto the Gehenna's gold so that we're getting this different variation of goldy metallics going on. And same again for the helmet, Retributor armor, just targeting very, very small areas of the Gehenna's gold with the Retributor armor, just giving us a bit of variation, you know. Once that's done, we can take some Naggaroth Night and Screamer Pink, which are different pinky purpley tones, and with some just Naggaroth Night on its own, I'm just going to start adding in some highlights and midtones to the sort of the upper parts of the wrinkles of the dress, just giving us different tonal variations on the dress, giving us different midtones, just makes it look a bit more interesting than just having those two contrast paint colours that we had. Taking some Bugman's Glow, which is a nice sort of pinky kind of tone, I'll use that to start adding in some tones where the Skeleton Horde contrast was more prevalent. And then just adding in different midtones over the purple. Just, you know, I'm just kind of making up as I go along, just trying to make the dress seem a little bit more interesting. Following the sort of like flow of the cape as the sort of direction that I'm painting so that it doesn't look like it's, you know, fighting against the miniature. Like add in some more of the Screamer Pink as well. Just makes it look just a bit more interesting, you know. It's a funky looking dress. I quite like that kind of like collection of colours. Then I can take some Targor Raid Shade, which is a nice deep reddish kind of shader, which I think works really nicely with gold metallics. And I'll paint it over everything that I have already painted gold. So that's all the parts of the chairs and also the helmet, crown, face mask that she has as well. And then with that, I can then take some Wraithbone, which is a very, very, very like thin, white, bright kind of bone tone, and I'll use that to highlight strands of her hair to make different strands stand out, add a bit of interest to her hair, mix in some white into the Wraithbone as well so that we can target different areas. And then once the Targor Raid Shade has dried, I can take some of this Alric Armor Gold, which is a very glimmery, shiny kind of gold tone, and I'll just target pretty much the most outer regions of the chair, the higher regions, the corners, everything like that to sort of bring out the real shiny parts of the gold. And then same again, I'll do that with the helmet, pretty much just targeting the sort of raised edges, the top of the helmet as well, trying to make sure I don't go over all of the previous colours so that it just becomes, you know, one amalgamation of gold. I want different tones going on. And then with that, I can take some Abaddon Black, take it down to a black wash consistency, and just start adding in some shadows back in just to create a bit more depth and contrast on the body and the dress. Just taking some water as well, washing off the brush and just using clean brush to sort of blend between that dark black wash so that it's not too much of a harsh difference. And then with that, I decided to go back over the chair that just had Garagak Sewer on it with some Mournfang Brown with a very, very thin brown wash, and just again clean off the brush, blend between that thin layer of Mournfang Brown, just so that you sort of blend nicely between the Garagak Sewer to the Mournfang Brown wash. And with that, that is Queen Anny done. And that's the last of the Cainhurst Castle models. So what does that mean? Well, that means we've got another expansion coming out next time with a lot of minis, which took a long time to paint and edit and put together. Stay tuned for that. But if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to drop it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, drop me a comment below. And if you do fancy supporting the channel even further, I have a Patreon and the link is on the screen. If you want to join this lovely crew of fantastic people who already support the channel, go check it out. I do behind the scenes content, you can vote on things you want to see, you have first dibs on any sales that I do, but if not, that's absolutely fine. I very much appreciate you just joining me here. And with that, thank you very much. That is the end of the Cainhurst Castle expansion. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time for some dungeon stuff. That sounded weird.